All right. I want to talk to you about where we are and where we're going and how we're going to get to where we're going, okay? And I know a lot of you have a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, because folks, it's been crazy for 5 years, but it's never been as crazy as it's been in the last 2 weeks, has it? My God, I mean, it's unbelievable what's going on. But I think after I'm done speaking today, I think you'll better understand why what's going on is going on and how we have to fight it and why we have to fight it. And I want to begin that by reading to you the email that I sent out. And I know all of you don't get emails, but I also made a phone call on D-Day that I hope you enjoyed with the special effects, sound effects from the war. I wanted you to feel the war. But I want to read to you from my D-Day letter because I think it's a good starting point. 70 years ago today, our grandfathers, fathers, brothers, uncles, nephews, and cousins did what had to be done, did whatever it took to defend freedom and defeat tyranny. Today, the 70th anniversary of D-Day, we honor all of those who had the courage and the fortitude to do what needed to be done, as horrific as that was. They did it not for themselves, but for a belief that all men and women have a right to be free, but that freedom is not free. They showed for all time that in order to be free, all men and women must be willing to do whatever it takes to defend their freedom, or their freedom will surely be lost. Our nation and our world is where it is today because the enemies of individual freedom and liberty are willing to do whatever it takes to enslave mankind. And those of us who claim to value our freedom are all too often unwilling to do whatever it takes to defeat them. Today, I ask you to reclaim the courage and commitment of those brave soldiers and sailors and airmen who defended our freedom 70 years ago and honor their sacrifice by personally committing to do whatever it takes to protect the freedom of all men and women going forward. You'll notice that I use the word whatever it takes many times in this note. Because when we fought in D-Day, they had to do whatever it took. I don't know, maybe some of you were like me. I kind of got locked in on the History Channel on D-Day because they were showing videos. I see some heads nodding. They were showing videos about the D-Day landing. And it was just so riveting, so compelling. And I just couldn't turn it off. I think my wife, thought I went into a coma. And kept pinching me to see if I was still alive. Because I probably watched it for like 10 hours. Because I was in awe. I was in awe of what they did. The bottom line was that the landing at Omaha Beach by the American forces was a disaster. It was a disaster. The bombers failed to take out the enemy guns. The paratroopers were dropped miles from where they were supposed to be. And our guys that were landing on the beaches were just being slaughtered. It was horrific. General Omar Bradley, who was in charge of the Army, was off the coast and on a ship and was so concerned. He was worried about having to evacuate. He thought we had lost. It was just not going well. It was not going well. And from every individual soldier who was on that beach, and they did a great job on the History Channel interviewing those men and hearing their stories about how horrific it was and what they had to do. It was just amazing, the courage and ingenuity. And the lesson of D-Day, the lesson for us today, is that what they understood is that they individually had to do something to win. It wasn't going to be handed to them. We say that freedom is not free, but they got the real deal. They understood what you have to do to remain free. And I did not even know this until I watched that show on the History Channel. But what happened was that somebody did do something, and it was the U.S. Navy. Because the Navy was offshore, and they had been given orders not to move in because of all the mines and obstacles. And they were afraid that our big battleships and cruisers would be sunk. And so they were standing back while our soldiers were being massacred. And officers of the Navy said, to hell with the rules, let's get in there. And they moved in within range so they could see what was going on, and then they started to just take out those gun emplacements and started to blow those pillboxes to pieces and gave the guys on the ground a chance to scramble up those hills and turn the tide, because individuals stood up and did something. And that's really the challenge we face today. I just got done reading a great book that I've talked to you about. It's called The Last Lion. It's about Winston Churchill during World War II. This book changed my life, changed my view of everything we're doing and where we are. And I encourage you to read it. It's a long read. It's like 1,000 pages. But it's riveting. And it taught me so much about how horrific war really is, and how bad World War II really was, and how evil it was. But Winston Churchill knew what evil was when no one else did. And Winston Churchill alone stood against evil, because he knew, and you need to know, and our current president doesn't understand, that it's not a choice to fight evil. It's not an option. It's not, well, do we fight evil or don't we? It's not an option. Winston Churchill knew that. He knew that you either fight evil now, or it will kill you or enslave you. And it will do that either now or later, but it will do it. And he was right. He was right. While the world was calling for Winston Churchill to surrender, and he would not. And in the United States, the papers were just calling him every name in the book. A fool. Be like France. Surrender. Because these Germans were just too tough to beat. And he wouldn't do it. And after the war, they found the SS plans that said that after Britain surrendered, the SS was going to go to England and take every male age 16 and over back to Germany and either enslave them or take them to the concentration camps and kill them. Every man 16 and over. Winston Churchill knew that. And that's why no matter how bad it was, he continued to fight. And we need to understand that today. Our current president thinks that you can just decide that you don't want to fight anymore. You can just unilaterally say, war's over. Doesn't work that way. And we're finding that out. And we're going to find it out in a worse way than you can ever imagine if we continue down this path. And so we need to make some changes. You know, while we all accept the fact that the generation that fought World War II was indeed our greatest generation, and after watching, on D-Day, it's awful hard to argue with. But I'm going to argue with it. Because I want you to be aware of some things that, are out there now that I think are very compelling. About our generation. About us. About the next generation. I was at the Concerned Veterans Defending Freedom event in Westlake. Nan and I went up. A few of you were there a few weeks ago. And it was the mother of a Navy SEAL who died in Afghanistan. And she spoke beautifully and with great courage. And she told me some things I did not know, and I don't think you know. And I think you need to know. She said, while the World War II generation indeed saved the world and was a great generation, what few people know is this war that we're currently engaged in is the longest war in American history. 12 years we've been fighting since 2001. And what's amazing about that is only 0.4 Less than half of 1% of our population has served in the military during those 12 years. Half of 1%. And that only 0.4% of 1% are currently doing the actual fighting. And she said we should be proud of these young men and women because they've done an amazing job. But she said the most important thing is they all volunteered to go. Never in history ever have people who could do anything else, who could go to college, some of them were professional athletes, intelligent, successful people, said, I'm not going to do that because I love freedom, I love my country, and I'm going to go to war to defend it by my own volition. And as a reward, what did they get? Well, here's another statistic that shocked me and stunned me. And I want you to know about it, and I want you to tell everyone you know about it. Because it's an American tragedy. This chart that's on the wall right now shows that from 2001 to December 31st of 2008, during the entire war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan, all over the world, we only had 630 soldiers killed. And 2,638 were wounded in action. That's 7 years. And then they changed the rules of engagement. Then the President of the United States and this administration changed the rules of engagement where they said that our troops couldn't even have bullets in their guns while they're walking around. That when they're firing live mortar shells on our boys and girls, we're allowed to shoot flares so we can see that we're not killing any innocents. And as a result, in the 4 years since 2009, January 1st, until December 31st of this year, we've seen 1,544 Americans die. And we went from 2,638 wounded to 15,036 wounded. Why? Elections have consequences. One of the other things that happened at that meeting, that the Concerned Veterans meeting, is there was a soldier there who had a Purple Heart, and there was a soldier there who had a Congressional Medal of Honor. And these young men were just unbelievable. They were unbelievable. The guy that got the Congressional Medal of Honor, I lost count. I think he was shot like 6 times. They were in an ambush in Afghanistan. He went back into the firefight like a dozen times, carried out 13 American soldiers, carried out 24 Afghan soldiers while he was being shot all the time. And he talked about his Congressional Medal of Honor, and he said, I never wear it because I don't consider it my medal. Because, and he was addressing a lot of vets at this event. There were a lot of vets there. He said, because I believe that every one of you would have done the same thing if you had had the opportunity. He said, I was nothing special. I was just a U.S. Marine doing his job. And the job had to be done, and I did it. And that goes back to what I said about D-Day, and what I said about us, and what I said about elections having consequences, what I said about the county commissioners, that you've got to be in a position to do something. And what scares me most today is that people are not doing that. I was on Cavuto, boy, it must have been about a year ago. I was on Cavuto talking about the IRS. And I had been on several times, and it's a tough situation. You get a minute and a half, and you try to say, what can I say that means anything in a minute and a half? And at that time, ironically, with the events that are going on now, what had just happened was that someone in the IRS had blown the whistle that Lois Lerner, even though she had been forced out of the IRS, was still using her IRS laptop and email account, even though she no longer worked for the agency. And someone had blown the whistle. And so I was on Cavuto to comment on that. And Neil said, Tom, what do you make of this? What has to happen here? And I said, Neil, what has to happen here is what just happened. Individuals, people who love freedom, people who love our country, have to stand up and do the right thing. And that's the bottom line. And so, like you, what is most concerning to me is that we're not seeing enough of that. Take this prisoner exchange. This Birdsall guy, for the 5 Taliban. Okay? You look at that, and you say to yourself, how many people were in the chain of command from the minute the decision was made by the White House to say, we're going to make this deal to get the 5 guys out of Guantanamo, get them on a plane and fly them to Qatar, or whatever they did, Qatar, and to get the SEALs to get in a helicopter in Afghanistan, fly to the place, and pick up Birdsall. How many people were in that chain of command? And what would it have taken for an officer who swore an oath to protect and defend this country? What would it have taken for him to stand up and just say, I swore an oath and I cannot break it. The president has asked me to let these people go and I cannot do it. So he will either have to relieve me of duty or I will have to resign my commission. But I cannot do this act. What a difference that would have made, wouldn't it? If they would have just said that out loud so that we would have been able to have the discussion about whether this was right or wrong before we did it. What a concept. Wouldn't that be great? But we didn't. So we now know, that we have this huge challenge. Because we've got to do whatever it takes to fight the evil that is among us. And we know that whatever we've done so far hasn't been enough. I said in my opening letter that the other side is willing to do whatever it takes to take away our individual freedom and liberty. Are you convinced of that now? Do you think that this president will stop? Do you think that the rest of the people that are in Guantanamo Bay will stay? Do you think that the illegal alien issue, that's humanitarian crisis we have on our borders, is an accident? Or do you think it's happening because they know no one will stop them? Right? And so you've got to fight power with power. On the back of the sheets that I have my letter, you'll see a list of Senate candidates. Okay? I was asked when we were down in Columbus a couple weeks ago for the photo voter ID rally, and it was the first time I had been with the media in a while down in Columbus, and so a lot of them wanted to talk to me about a whole host of things. And Mark Kovacs from the Dix chain got a hold of me, and he said, Tom, you guys aren't happy with Kasich, and you're not happy with Joyce, and you're not happy with a lot of people in the state. What are you going to do in November? And I really wasn't ready for the question, so I thought about it, and I said, well, we're going to work like heck to take the U.S. Senate, because that's the most important thing we can do. So on this sheet, there's a ranking of the 10 races that the Republican Party has to win 6 of in order to take control of the Senate. We, you and I, must commit to do everything we can to help these candidates. Because the only way we can do anything to stop this administration is to take the Senate. It's just that simple. They have to win 6 seats. And so all the Tea Party groups in the state are going to be focused to raise money for them. Many of them will have robocalling capabilities that we can make calls for them. And I guarantee you there will be people from Ohio going to these states to work for them in person. It's vital to our interests. I don't know how many laws you need to break to qualify for impeachment. I just know that when impeachment has been used in the past, they had done a lot less than this current administration. 3 weeks ago, I would have never said those words. I would have never said to you that I think that impeachment of the President of the United States is in our future. I believe that it is highly probable that we will have to take that course of action to stop the President of the United States.